Hey, everybody. Hope everybody has had a nice Tuesday. Today is April 11th, 2023. I had to look down and double check. I sometimes get my days of the week wrong, so I'm glad that we got it correct today. Welcome to Status Coup here. You are joined by just me today, Lewis. I will be going through all sorts of updates, mostly regarding East Palestine. Colin, I'm actually getting a weird echo, I just noticed. I'm not sure if that is something. Oh, I think it's because I have YouTube open. Okay, that is why. Sorry about that, folks. So today we're going to be going through a couple important topics with an update on East Palestine, including, unfortunately, a truck filled with contaminated soil being hauled away from East Palestine, actually spilling, still in Columbiana County, Ohio. That truck was carrying roughly 40,000 pounds of contaminated soil away from the derailment site, where ground zero essentially is from where the derailment happened back on February 3rd, followed by the February 6th controlled burn. So we'll be getting into the details of that. We also are going to be covering a piece that Jordan just published on our Status Coup Substack earlier today regarding residents still getting rashes today. Statuscoup.com or statuscoup.substack.com to see that and to be subscribed to our Substack. Residents still today getting rashes as a result of potentially related to the derailment. These are folks who are on city water in East Palestine, still getting rashes. So we'll go through the details there. And then we also have some criticism coming from Purdue University professor Andrew Welton. Andrew Welton has been an independent tester doing research in East Palestine, covering everything that's going on with what he has said in an interview that he did with News Nation, as well as a series of tweets that he went through, basically calling out a lot of the things that we've been saying, that the EPA testing is inadequate. The results being provided are all over the place. So we'll get into the details of what Andrew Welton gets into as well. But we're going to start off here first with the contaminated soil truck overturns. And before we pull up that article, folks, if you're just getting in here, please smash the like button so that helps this get to more people. It's an easy thing you can do to help us out. Also, if you're seeing us for the first time, or maybe you're not subscribed to us yet, please, easy thing to do, press the subscribe button right down below, hit the bell if you want notifications. And with that, let's get into the contaminated soil truck overturning. Colin, we can go ahead and pull up that first article on the screen. Truck carrying toxic soil from East Palestine, Ohio train derailment site overturns in Columbiana County. We can go down here. East Palestine, Ohio, a truck carrying toxic soil from the East Palestine train derailment overturned just before 1 p.m. on Monday. That's yesterday in Columbiana County. According to the Ohio State Patrol, a commercial vehicle hauling 40,000 pounds of contaminated soil from the train derailment site was involved in a crash on State Route 165 near Waterford Road. The driver was 74-year-old Philip Falk of McDonald, Pennsylvania. He suffered minor injuries from the crash and was cited for operating a vehicle without reasonable control. The northbound tractor-trailer traveled off the right side of the roadway, hit a ditch and utility pole, and overturned on its right side. Highway Patrol estimates that roughly 20,000 pounds of soil spilled onto the roadway and berm. The local fire department and the Ohio EPA were called to the scene. According to the EPA, the Ohio EPA, the spill was contained and not a threat to nearby waterways. So this derailment, not a derailment. I want to look into a couple things here. Number one, this is a big deal, yes, but I don't want to blow it out of proportion. This is in an area where there are some residential housing, but this is a fairly rural area with not much going on around it. But this is just another thing here that has gone wrong in this series of things that have gone wrong. Fortunately, it doesn't look like this will be a concern for water. Where it spilled, there weren't any waterways or anything like that. Colin, actually, if you don't mind pulling up the Google Maps link that I put in there so that we can give folks an idea. You can zoom in a little bit here. This is actually just to the north of East Palestine. And technically still in Columbiana County. This truck was on its way out. Fortunately, not near any major creeks or anything like that. Thanks, Colin, for doing that. We can actually show a couple of photos as well. You can show the photo here first from my Twitter, just to give folks an idea of what this looked like. This was sent to me by an East Palestine resident from one of the Facebook groups that has a lot of information about what is going on there. So you can see the spill kind of in the distance there. And then we've got one short clip that we can play as well, Colin, just to give folks the full picture. So that gives folks a little bit more of an idea of the scene as to what was actually going on there. Again, just outside of East Palestine, where this truck carrying contaminated soil that was being hauled away from the derailment site was spilled. One thing I wanted to point out that somebody else here in the comments in the live chat pointed out, Travers Wolf, 74-year-old still working, is his name Joe Biden. That is notable, though, that a 74-year-old is hauling this away. This is hazardous materials that has a high likelihood of, if something happens, causing issues. Again, I don't think that this is going to necessarily cause issues with water contamination or anything like that. But for the folks in the immediate vicinity, there's definitely concerns over the air quality right after this happened. Again, in the town of East Palestine, they're covering all of this soil as they dig it up because of concerns about the air quality and whatnot. And even in this area where the soil is still being dug up, residents are still today being affected by the air quality as a result of the ongoing cleanup that is still going on in East Palestine. From some drone footage that I actually just saw before coming on here, it looks like one side of the tracks is nearly complete as far as the soil removal goes, but that is only half of the soil removal. They still have to do the entire other side of the tracks in this process. I'm working on getting resident Corey Figley to see if I can get him back to join. I'm going to reach out to him after this to see if we can get him to join later in the week or provide us with an update with some of his drone footage that he has been releasing. If you haven't seen his video that he shared with us a couple weeks back, Status Coup has gotten exclusive drone footage from Corey that shows the time frame just before the derailment, and then, just after the derailment, and then leading right into the controlled burn as well. Actually, it looks like Colin has a couple clips of it here. So some of that drone footage is absolutely powerful and really shows the scale of how big this ordeal really was in East Palestine just before the controlled burn, and then right here as the controlled burn is really beginning. So we'll see if we can check in with Corey to see if we can get an update from the sky of what the cleanup is looking like right now. So again, 74-year-old driving the truck, not a great look. And this is just one more thing in the series of thing after thing after thing that has gone wrong with the derailment, with the cleanup process, with the testing, or more importantly, lack of testing. Just another nail in the coffin here as far as things going wrong with the cleanup in East Palestine. We also reached out to Bob Bocock for comment on this. Colin, if we can go ahead and pull that quote up on the screen. Bob Bocock is Aaron Brockovich's partner, as well as a water treatment engineer. He said, "The gift that keeps on giving. Yes, it will volatilize and could contaminate water, but they will likely clean up the dirt before it hits the water. The local air will be impacted for the time that it is there." So again, not trying to over dramatize this. The potential risks to folks close by isn't anything crazy and isn't anything out of the ordinary here. But it's out of the ordinary for folks right there, but it's not some major disaster on top of this, but just one additional misstep in a series of missteps at the hands of, once again, Norfolk Southern here, the train company involved in all of this mess up to date at this point. So that's what's going on with the contaminated soil. For folks who are just joining us, please, we got over 200 people just watching now. Please hit the like button down below to get this out to more folks. I noticed that we already had a new member as well as a super chat, like as we were starting right here. So I want to say thank you to new member JG1982. JG1982, thank you so much for becoming a new member. For folks who want to become a new member, you can do that by going to statuscoup.com/join, statuscoup.com/join for literally as low as $5 to $10 a month. It is what enables us to be able to Send me to East Palestine not once, but twice, and hopefully a third time coming up here soon. It's what enables Jordan to be able to go back to Flint time and time and time again over the last several years. He's actually getting back to Flint to continue reporting on that story at the end of this month. It also enables helping us get on the ground in other places. Jordan was just live this afternoon from Rutgers covering a strike going on there, so a protest going on there. If you didn't see that earlier, encourage you to check it out after the live stream here. I'm sure he'll have more to share on that later in the week. So again, membership is how we're able to continue to go and tell these stories. We're also working on so much in the background right now too. We spent hours on the phone yesterday with sources trying to break new information on all sorts of stories going on here related to East Palestine as well as other topics. So if you're able to help support independent, on-the-ground journalism like you're getting from us here at Status Coup, please consider doing it. And then another way you can help out, I noticed we had a super chat already too from Craig Severance. This is talk about news wanting to call out Holcomb for this event. It was probably coming to Indiana. Who knows where that soil was going? Not 100% sure. Based on the direction, that one might not have been going to Indiana, but I do know that this contaminated soil is headed into all sorts of different directions. Let's see the comment here. We got someone asking about the placard on the trucks. Do you know what it says exactly? Thanks for the question, Michael. I am not sure what the placard on the truck says exactly. But that is something I can look into for sure. I have a couple of folks on the ground who might be able to help answer that question, and we will follow up with it if we learn anything new there. So thanks for the question, Michael. Appreciate that. Alrighty, so we're going to move on now from soil in East Palestine to, unfortunately, another related East Palestine topic here. It has now been essentially 10 weeks almost since this train derailment. And again, residents are still dealing with health effects from this on a daily basis in many cases. Even when I was in East Palestine last, a little over 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago at this point, I was noticing and having symptoms from being in areas closer to the water aeration devices, and even just being in areas in close proximity to Sulphur Run, which is the creek that runs essentially right from ground zero area where this derailment happened, right through the center of East Palestine, eventually meeting into Leslie Run, which is also a very heavily contaminated. It is looking a little bit better these days, but is still dealing with contamination, eventually before meeting into Little Beaver Creek, and then right into the Ohio River, which is a massive watershed that leads to millions of people in the United States. So again, near Sulphur Run in East Palestine, folks even today are still experiencing a lot of these symptoms, ranging from sore throats, tightness in their necks. We're having folks getting bloody noses, bad headaches. The list goes on. And these impacts are still having today. But one of those other impacts is rashes. And Jordan did some reporting on this just today that came out. Colin, we can go ahead and pull up, or I can pull up the tweet thread if you want to pull up some of the images. We put out a thread here and unfortunately got some tough images from some residents. I'm going to go ahead and read this thread here. 67 days since the East Palestine train derailment, below our ongoing rashes residents are developing on city water, which Governor DeWine and the EPA have declared safe. This rash is on the back of resident Julia Rochelle. She has had for nearly 3 weeks. Just to be clear, we did get permission from her to post them. The rash on the back or on the left right there. Julie has also developed a rash on her breast, which is the photo that you can see on the right there. Julie's husband, Keith, also has rashes on his hands and fingers, which you can see on the screen right now. Keith Rochelle told Status Coup his doctor gave contradictory guidance. Quote, "My doctor said don't drink the water. Obviously, we are on city water, but they say everything is okay. That shit that's going on in this town is criminal." Julie and Keith are not the only residents who are on East Palestine city water who have developed rashes, which doctors have diagnosed as chemical burns. Kristen Battaglia has had severe rashes on her face, legs, and feet. Colin, we can just pull up the Substack article for folks to check it out. If you want to see the full story here on this, Jordan published it on our Substack. Again, we post all sorts of stuff on the Substack in addition to the video format that you're seeing here. So if you have friends maybe who are more interested in reading about some of this stuff, make sure you're checking out our Substack, because that is a great alternative to be able to share out. But unfortunately, like I said, these rashes are still going on and still happening, and affecting folks every single day in a lot of cases. I mean, the resident who shared these images with us has had those rashes for weeks. The first time I was in East Palestine, we had folks who had rashes and had never dealt with this before. And it seemed like at that point, roughly half, maybe more, of the folks that I was talking to in town were developing these rashes and were having all of these other symptoms. And for whatever reason, everyone, from the outside is looking in and telling them, oh no, it's probably the stress, it's probably this. The thing that drove me the most crazy was, this is from the first trip after I ran into Governor DeWine on the same street as resident Jenna Catone, as well as several of her neighbors that I literally interviewed the night before. And these folks were telling me they have rashes, they're having breathing complications, they're needing to go to the hospital to have nebulizer treatments. They're all having sore throats, they're coughing, they're getting bloody noses. All of these folks living with the railroad tracks essentially in their backyard. The governor tells me that these folks should go to the clinic that the state had just set up. So I go to the clinic and find out, obviously, that the clinic is essentially a sham at that point. They were not providing any actual sort of testing for chemicals of your urine or in your blood. They were not providing any prescriptions of any sort that could treat you for any of these things. They weren't providing any diagnosis of any kind. What they were doing was providing information and guidance and somebody to talk to, which I'm not saying that somebody to talk to isn't something that is necessary. I'm not saying that should be forgotten about in this, because the whole mental side of this is a whole other ball game that folks are having to deal with on a daily basis, especially, if they were at home and they heard this thing happen, the train derail, and now every time they hear a train come through town, they're petrified, rightfully so. So unfortunately, folks at the clinic weren't getting the help that they wanted. And in many cases, the clinic was gaslighting these people into thinking that, oh, the rashes are they're stress. You're going through a really hard time right now. And you know what? You and all of your neighbors are you're all getting rashes from the stress all at the same time, more than half the town. Come on. So these people have been gaslit on so many of these things, the rashes being one of the symptoms, but it's much more than just the rashes. It's all of the other symptoms as well that I've said to you all on multiple occasions is really hard to show. It's not like I can walk in with a video camera and show you that, like, hey, the air smells funny, and that's why everyone in town has a sore throat right now. That's why when Christy Ferguson spends too much time in her home that smells like chemicals still, at least as of the last time that I was there, why her eyes are burning and why my eyes were burning inside of her house. So it's hard to physically show this stuff, but fortunately or unfortunately, it's a weird balance here. Some of their concerns have been shown now by some folks who are a little bit harder to say, oh, those folks aren't, that we don't necessarily know that what they're saying is true. We don't really know. When we just saw about a week and a half ago, members of the CDC who were in East Palestine going door to door, studying the health impacts that this could be having on residents, actually came forward and said, hey, we're not feeling well. We're not feeling well while we're going door to door, checking in on residents. These guys weren't even directly at the derailment site. They weren't at the derailment site. They were out going door to door, talking to residents in town. So this is validating to a degree the concerns that many of the residents have been saying that they've been having for literally 2 months at this point. We're nearing 3 months. Like I said, it'll be 10 weeks on Friday since the initial derailment. 10 weeks on Friday since the original derailment. And again, I mean, these folks they're still dealing with rashes, as we said in that Substack piece right there. They're still dealing with sore throats. They're still dealing with bad headaches, especially when they're near the creeks, especially when they're near the derailment site. Things are still not okay in East Palestine. And this is a good transition into the next element of this, because finally, we're continuing now to see Andrew Welton, a Purdue University professor, an independent tester in this East Palestine case, raising his voice a little bit more than I have heard him recently. He's been doing a lot of fantastic work in East Palestine. I know a lot of residents are really excited every time he comes back into town, because he's taking the time to go do tests that the EPA hadn't been doing, that the CTEH hadn't been doing, the railroad contractor hadn't been doing. And he actually did an interview earlier this week, and I'll get into it in just a second, that he was essentially going out and he talked about the members of the CDC getting sick. He talks a little bit about himself getting sick, actually. So that's another person. Again, residents in East Palestine aren't happy that, members of the CDC are getting sick. Folks like me got, experienced some of the symptoms that folks like Andrew Welton, got some of the symptoms. But it's, for them, adds some extra validation that their concerns are being seen by others. We got over 300 people watching, guys, right now. Please smash the like button down below. It helps get this out to more people, to more folks. It makes a big difference. It seems like a small gesture, but please go ahead and do that. Also, again, I'm going to go through and I'll make sure all the super chats get read during or at the end of this stream. So we read some early already. Membership also very important to keep the show going on. So with that, Colin, we can go ahead and play the first clip from an interview with Andrew Welton on News Nation earlier this week.
Andrew Welton, professor of civil, environmental, and ecological engineering at Purdue. Andrew, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So about half of this group of investigators from the CDC got sick. This was as the EPA was insisting everything was safe. What do you make of this?
Well, there's a number of other people that also got sick that visited the area. And clearly, the EPA's air testing data was not accurately identifying the health risks. So I hope that many of these individuals that did get sick were able to recover, but it's just reaffirmed that the air testing data was not adequate in February.
Can you tell us about being on the ground in East Palestine? What did you start noticing was happening inside of your own body, and what was going through your mind as it was happening?
Well, when we were in East Palestine initially in February conducting water sampling of the creeks, we didn't really experience anything except shock that there was so much contamination visible still in the creeks, and folks weren't being told to stay away from it or the health risks associated with it. I didn't start feeling a headache until we were about to leave. And then for the next 2 days, it was just constant. It got worse the next day and then went away the day after. So that was kind of shocking, disconcerting, because I was not dehydrated. I was not, there was no anxiety associated with it. It was just trying to figure out what was going on.
You recently tweeted about a Freedom of Information request that you submitted, and you are calling for more transparency in light of this report of the 6 CDC investigators. What do you want the government to be more transparent about?
Well, the fact that we were not told that CDC investigators got sick is a real issue. And the government agencies that are responding to this disaster need to be more transparent, share the information that they have with the people. Because for over a month, people were complaining that they were getting sick, and government air testing results kept saying that the air is safe, water is safe, so therefore, you're not getting sick. So I think there really needs to be an alignment of government investigators getting data to answer very specific questions, which they are starting to do now.
So you heard it there, not from me, but from an actual expert who is an independent tester here, works at Purdue University as a professor. He's an engineer, environmental engineer, all of this stuff. He's got the background. He talked about a couple things in that clip, and there's another clip that we're going to show in a second, but we're going to break down that first half first. The first main thing that he says is the EPA data and testing is not adequate, especially considering the symptoms that the residents are getting. There's obviously some sort of misstep in between here that Dr. Welton points out, which is very clear to me as somebody who's been there. I've spent about 2 weeks in East Palestine. You don't need a PID detector in your hand, a photoionization detector in your hand to tell you that something is not right in the air. Your body will tell you that there's something not right in the air when you go into some of these homes, when you spend some time by the creek. So, again, from an expert, not from me, from an expert, you're hearing that the EPA data is not adequate. The testing is not adequate. Again, I covered some of this about a week and a half ago in the piece that we posted on Substack, where the EPA actually admits in that town hall meeting that the PID detectors that they're using can't test butyl acrylate at the level of concern. It can only read it at 5 times the actual level of concern. The device only goes down to 100 parts per billion, but the level of concern set out by the EPA is 20 parts per billion. So they're telling people their homes are fine using this device, when in reality that device cannot answer that question for you. So that's the first big takeaway that Dr. Welton points out, is that the EPA data is not adequate what they're doing. The next thing that he pointed out was when he was talking about his own symptoms. I said this after my trip too, but when he was getting sick, he got a really bad headache. I got a really bad headache as well. He pointed out that he wasn't dehydrated, he wasn't anxious about the situation, but that he experienced these symptoms as a result of this. I can give you, again, my personal take on it. I wasn't dehydrated. I was drinking plenty of water. We had a big case of bottled water in the back of the car for both of my trips there, because I'm not drinking the regular water there. That's for sure right now. So plenty of water in the car that I'm drinking throughout the day, kind of constantly had one with me. So not dehydrated. I wasn't anxious about the situation either, because I had already at that point, that was near the end of my second trip. Maybe the beginning of my first trip, there'd be some anxiety there that could potentially cause some of these symptoms. But at that point in the trip, I wasn't feeling nervous about this or anything. So for me, I can say that, the symptoms that I was experiencing, there's no reason that I would have experienced them otherwise. And it seems like Dr. Welton, again, a professional here who's looking at this with a scientific lens, similar sentiment from him. And then the last thing that Dr. Welton points out in that clip there is that folks were not told soon enough that CDC investigators had been sick. It took weeks for that information that I pointed out in the last little section here. It took weeks for that information to get out. Those CDC workers were getting sick at the beginning of March, from what I can remember, and it wasn't until the end of the month, until about the end of March, beginning of April, where we got that information. So it took weeks for them to release information that, hey, members of the CDC are getting sick too. But if members of the CDC are getting sick and all these residents are getting sick, why the hell is the federal government, the state government, the local government, the Ohio EPA, the US EPA, why are all of these people telling everyone that everything is fine? Why are they telling them that still today? They still say everything is fine. It's been 10 weeks. It's been 10 weeks, and I still can't understand why that is the case. If you don't know, say you don't know. Again, it's way the hell too late for this now, but weeks ago, when they didn't know that it was safe, they should have said, we need to bring in the appropriate testing. We need to get these stuff organized. Maybe hold off on moving right back into your house. Instead, these people have been lied to. Colin, let's go ahead and play the second half of the interview with Dr. Welton.
And the spotlight is fading on East Palestine. I know you found inconsistencies in the federal government air and water test results in Ohio. What do you fear residents there are still facing, and what concerns you about their future now?
Well, we've stayed involved because it does seem that agencies were not responsive to the people's questions and asking specific answers. I can say we have asked the agencies to provide us their water sampling plans so that we can look to see how our data stack up against theirs. Our data are not matching what they are reporting publicly online. And so really there needs to be some type of independence here, some type of independent oversight and influence and questioning about what they're doing, so that the response can directly serve the people impacted.
I mean, you mentioned the discrepancy. Is your data showing higher levels than the government is reporting?
So our data is sometimes showing higher levels and sometimes showing lower levels. And that could be due to simply where we're taking the sample, how we're taking the sample, or it could be due to something else. So what we want is access to the information that agencies are using to determine that their data is adequate.
If the government's own investigators are getting sick, and meanwhile the EPA, a government body, is saying everything is safe, what does that mean? Can you break it down for us? Does that mean the EPA is lying? Does it mean that the EPA's testing methods are not rigorous enough, or they're not testing for the right things? What is actually happening here?
So in March is when the CDC team got sick. So that was several weeks ago. But really what that meant was that the EPA's air testing data did not accurately identify what contaminants were in the air and the health risks that they posed to a number of people, not just the CDC team. This isn't that uncommon after disasters, unfortunately, because generally questions that need to be answered sometimes aren't answered. And then when things like this pop up, you don't see a rapid response team go to try to figure out what's going on. That's what should happen, but generally you don't see that.
Yeah.
So what you should be happening, he's not seeing happening. What should happen in one of these disasters where you have a disaster response team, a clear, folks who come in and get organized and have all of the, everybody's got their ducks in a row and everybody's coordinated and working together. And what should happen isn't happening. Again, there's a couple big things that he pointed out in here, and I'm going to break down each of the independent points. We've got basically 400 people watching right now. Please smash the like button, help get this out to more folks so that we can continue to grow as we've been growing, covering this story and also covering plenty of other stories over the years here. If you're seeing us just for the first time right now, consider pressing the subscribe button down below as well. And I wanted to point out one tip that we got just as we were here. Carrie Nanstead tipped $20. Good reports. Thank you so much, Carrie. We really appreciate the support. That was a statuscoup.com/donate tip. That's another place that you can go to go ahead and do that. Membership, also very important though. Statuscoup.com/join is another way to support us. But let's go through a couple of the things that were just brought up in that clip right there. So the first thing that Dr. Welton said, and I can tell you that I have also experienced similar things, but again, it's nice to hear this from an expert. I've unfortunately had to become as much of an expert as I can in a lot of these topics and a lot of the chemicals and all of this sort of stuff. But it's really good to hear this from an expert who's actually on the ground doing independent tests in East Palestine. So he said they've continued to go back because agencies were not responsive to residents' questions, which is definitely something we experience. People are, in a lot of cases, being treated like they don't know. The questions over the past couple weeks at this point have gotten very, very pointed from a lot of these residents. I've seen some of it myself from the very first town hall that actually happened before we even got into town to the second big town hall, which is where the conversation on dioxins really started to get going. That was the one where Stephen Lester was there answering questions about dioxin. They also had a lawyer that was put on by River Valley Organizing. The questions started to get a little bit more pointed there, and folks learned a whole lot. Fast forward to about a week and a half ago, when the latest River Valley Organizing town hall took place, and the questions were hyper specific to the point where residents were able to get a lot of new information out of the mayor, Trent Conway, from the representative of the EPA, Mark Durno, who was present, who let out the information that what I mentioned to you just a second ago, the PID detectors used for the residential air testing were not sufficient for residential air testing, especially when testing butyl acrylate, one of the chemicals of concern here. They also got the information out of Mark Durno that the EPA had only provided modeling for a vent and burn of 1 car of vinyl chloride, not 5. They prevented the modeling for 1 car of vinyl chloride to be vented and burned. And then they burned 5 without the modeling for 5. That decision was made at the very last minute. Sunday night, everyone went to bed with the plan that it was 1. Monday morning, they woke up and the plan was still 1. it was some point in the middle of the day on Monday that the decision jumped from burning 1 to 5. At least that's what we can tell from looking at the press conferences and whatnot, as well as getting that information from Mark Durno that he put out during that town hall. Again, though, that is only because residents have had to get really sharp in their question asking because agencies were not responding to them before. So they've had to sharpen up on a lot of this stuff. And to their credit, man, these residents are experts in a lot of this stuff at this point. Let's keep going down here through. So the next point that he brought up was so Dr. Welton had asked for water sampling plans. And saying that the data that he received was not matching, the data that he was finding in his sampling of the streams and creeks in and around East Palestine was not matching the data that he was seeing from the Ohio EPA, as well as from the Ohio EPA, as well as from the federal EPA. So Dr. Welton, we covered this, Jordan and I covered this about a week ago, going through some of that data at different points along Sulphur Run and Leslie Run throughout East Palestine and comparing. These are the results that Welton and his independent testers were finding, and these are the results that the Ohio EPA was finding. In some cases, Dr. Welton's numbers were more than twice the amount of contamination that the Ohio EPA found. In some cases, though, as he pointed out, it was the opposite. That shouldn't make anybody feel good. The numbers are all over the place. The test results from two, you would hope, are very reputable organizations. I mean, Dr. Welton's working with some really great researchers and whatnot at Purdue University. I know a lot of grad students have been volunteering and working with him on doing this. I've seen some of the updates that they've been putting out on Twitter. So it seems like they've got their ducks in a row and they know what they're doing, and they've been very transparent with their process. I haven't seen that sort of transparency from the Ohio EPA or the federal EPA. And when someone like Dr. Welton asks them for their water sampling plans, and from that interview, it seems like they didn't provide him with it, that seems like a red flag, so that he can try to look and see why are the numbers different. He's not receiving it. That's a big issue. That's a very big issue. And then the last thing that he said in here was the EPA test did not accurately identify what was in the air. Again, that goes from the outdoor tests as well as the indoor tests. And he kind of ties it into, they're not accurately finding what's in the air if you're having the number of people getting sick who are getting sick. And again, I'll say it's not just residents. It's not just residents. It is also members of the CDC. It is also journalists like myself and others. There are other journalists who've gotten sick covering this story or who've experienced some of the symptoms. It's enough people that it absolutely should be a concern here. And we have a little bit more information as well from Dr. Welton. The data that is coming out, he points out that folks are getting, that residents are getting, is hard to read. It's inconsistent, and it is in all sorts of different formats. It's not an easy to read, here's everything you need, here are the bullet points, this is what a high level looks like, this is what a low level looks like. You literally have to spend like an hour, 2 hours, sometimes more, going through, reading the document, Googling what some of these things are, looking for, okay, what is the level of concern? Okay, well, which agency should I look up what the level of concern is from? Because OSHA will tell you one thing, and then another organization will tell you another, and one of them's for residential, and one of them's for in a workplace. So Dr. Welton kind of points some of this out. Colin, if you want to pull up the first tweet, I think it's a thread from Dr. Welton here. So the scrum of contractors working for Norfolk Southern and government agencies is surprising. Well owners are now receiving info in formats that differ from other consultant and health department formats. Stantec isn't sending QA/QC data. I'm getting asked for help. Take a look. And I don't expect you to be able to see these very well. It's a very small thing. You don't even necessarily need to, but those are some absolutely massive tables with a bunch of very complicated chemical names on them, with levels that are in varying formats, in varying degrees of how they're being measured. So it'll, one of them might be milligrams per liter, and another one might be, in a different format. So you're sitting there trying to need to look at it in one format, and then you need to transfer it and do the conversion to figure out how you would read it in another way. And that sort of stuff, unless you're a scientist, is very confusing. It's hard to do. And in a lot of cases, you can't just Google it, because these are not like easy conversions in a lot of cases for a regular person like you or I. So this is what he mentions: well owners. This is private well sampling, from what I understand, or well sampling that was done, not private well sampling, but the sampling that was done of people's wells on their properties who are not on city water. So that's just one part of it. Colin, is that a thread? Is there more below that one, or no? I forget. Yes. So he continues by saying, as incident commander, EPA and EPA Great Lakes should be approving how information is communicated, as they are supposed to represent the public's interests. Residents are being bombarded with different files, info, and organizations. In the systems thinking course, I always taught students to observe the system. Don't just listen to what people in it say, to understand its purpose. Federal and state agencies still have yet to fully align their actions with resident needs. There's still time to correct. And again, Dr. Welton has been on this for a while, saying that the EPA, you still have time. You still have time. You can come in and you can change what you're doing. You need to course correct, is something I've seen him say on Twitter on a variety of occasions. But again, it's been 10 weeks. It's been 10 weeks. 10. 60-something days at this point. What are they doing? Why isn't this easy for people to understand at this point? There should be either everything should be formatted exactly the same as far as the test results go, or they should have a website that is very clear of like, these are the levels you're looking for. This is where it's safe. This is where it's not safe. And everything should be in one place, but it's not. It's chaos. It's chaos. It's clearly chaos. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess that these folks are still needing to deal with on a daily basis. This is their life now, trying to freaking decipher test results for their water, for their air, being lied to that everything is fine when clearly it's not. There's one more thread from Dr. Welton here we can pull up. And in this one, Welton tells the EPA it's time to ask for help. So he says, hey, Dr. Welton continues, how do EPA, Michael Regan, who is the director of the federal EPA, the EPA Great Lakes, at White House, et al., find a better way? ? How do these organizations find a better way? Ask for help. All of what's happening is avoidable and could have been anticipated. And this is him quote tweeting what we were kind of talking about before. I'm actually going to read some of that top of the quote tweet again. Again, it's a scrum of contractors working for Norfolk Southern government agencies is surprising, is what he says. Again, that's just like the number of all of the different agencies involved, the number of different contractors involved are making this even more complicated, because every contractor you hire has a different format, has a different thing that they're looking into. So it makes it that much more complicated. And again, I mean, he tags the White House in there too. What the hell has the Biden administration done about this? What have they done? I don't know. To me, it seems like early on in this could have been like they come in and they see that this happens and they could come in and fucking save the day. Pardon my French there. I didn't mean to let that slide out, but they could come in and save the day. They could come in and say, you know what, we're going to make sure that everything here is taken care of. We're going to make sure that these residents don't need to go beg Norfolk Southern for money every single week to make sure that they can stay in a hotel. We're not going to make these residents have to, be lied to about their air testing, and actually bring in the appropriate people and have an actual incident command structure that is organizing everything and making everything clear. We can actually put pressure on the House and the Senate to really pass some new railroad legislation. We can actually, have Pete Buttigieg come in and try to put forward real regulations on the railroads and do an investigation in a much quicker time frame and get this stuff actually sorted out. But they've chosen to just keep everything at an arm's length and like almost not want to touch it. Like, we kind of, I don't know. I don't think we want to, I don't think we want to get involved here. Like what, I understand that Governor DeWine of Ohio, who's also done a terrible job here. There's a long list of people who've done a terrible job here, but he's near the top. He hasn't declared a state of emergency still. When he declares a state of emergency, there's a chance that you get some additional federal resources. But that's not an excuse for Biden and the Biden administration to come in and try to help. If that needs to happen, that they need to declare a state of emergency, Joe Biden he's the president. He can say, hey, DeWine, you're messing this up. Declare a state of emergency, and I'll come in and we'll give you as many federal resources as you need. But no, he's quiet. Again, they're just kind of like, I don't know. We'll kind of deal with this. No, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I see Jamie in the comments here. Thanks for watching, Jamie. Jamie is a resident who's been on a couple times. Every day it's something new. I wish I could go back to February 2nd when I still had a home. And I know that all the other folks from East Palestine who are watching feel the same way. These folks do not want to be, I've heard on multiple occasions, folks being like, oh, these people are just trying to get money to go stay in a hotel. These people don't want to stay in a hotel anymore. I saw a post from a resident earlier today, Juja, who we've had on a couple times. She's been in a hotel for Valentine's Day, for St. Patrick's Day, for Easter with her 9-year-old. She's like, that's not how we wanted to spend those days. It's been almost 10 weeks. These people are living in small hotel rooms for the most part, without a kitchen, not near their job, needing to commute back and forth now, not having any clue about what the actual air testing is inside of their house, being lied to on a daily or weekly basis, feeling absolutely hopeless. What is going on? What is going? And I'll do this one, go over this one last thing here, and then I'm going to start to wrap things up here. But on top of all of this, as we reported last week, it's looking like these folks are going to have to pay taxes on the money that they've gotten for relocation from the railroad. I'll say that again. Money that these folks have had to go beg and plea for from Norfolk Southern to relocate for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It kind of depends on these folks' situations. Some people have been able to get it for longer than others. They go beg the railroad for the money, and they were asked to fill out a W-9 form at the Norfolk Southern Assistance Center. So they fill out a W-9 form because many of them didn't have a choice. If you wanted to get your family out of there and you didn't have the money otherwise to do so, you had no other choice but to sign that W-9, even knowing that it might cause you to need to pay taxes. I reached out to Norfolk Southern for comment on this, and they confirmed that, yes, they were making people sign W-9s, and that at the end of 2023, anyone who got more than $600 is going to get a 1099 form at the end of the year. Now, I deal with W-9s and 1099s all the time. I'm an independent contractor. I do work with Jordan and Status Coup, but I do work with about 5 or 6 other companies that I do video editing work for. A W-9 is taxable income. I have to put my 1099s that I get from all of those companies into my taxes, and then I can try to get write-offs off of them. But that doesn't, so they might be able to write off some of this, but they're going to have to pay taxes on at least some of that income. That is insane. That is insane. Again, where the hell is the Biden administration? They could come in. They could have come in weeks ago and set up some sort of intermediary so that these folks don't need to go to Norfolk Southern at all to go get any of this money at all. These folks should be able to have some sort of government intermediary where they say, hey, I'm going to be in this hotel for these days. And they're like, yep, okay, here's your reloadable debit card, or here, we'll take your receipts. We'll pass all this stuff on to Norfolk Southern so that you don't need to deal with their BS. But nope. Let's, again, Biden administration, looking at it from over here. Ridiculous. Colin, can we just pull up that Substack piece for a second just to show folks? Yep. So I'll read the headline here. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but pay for your poisoning. East Palestine residents to be taxed on disaster reimbursements despite Norfolk Southern assuring them otherwise. That's right. The other half of this is Norfolk Southern was telling these people that the W-9 form was only for their internal purposes. Are you kidding me? When I asked about the details of that, they were like, oh, didn't answer. They didn't answer that second follow-up email. Ridiculous. Guys, we got about 400 people watching. If you haven't pressed the like button already, I know we're wrapping up here, but please press the like button. It helps with the algorithm for folks to even watch this after this video is posted. That Substack piece, though, and again, I've mentioned this a couple times, there's quite a few Substack pieces we've been putting out in the last couple weeks. That is just another easy way to support us. If you are not already on that Substack mailing list, it's statuscoup.substack.com. If you put your email in there, anytime we put up a new article, you'll get an email about it right into your inbox. So if you're missing YouTube notifications or something like that, and it'd be better to go in your email, that's a really good place to do it. It's free. There is a paid version if you want to as well. If that's another way you want to support us, you can. But again, the real way, the most important way to potentially support our continuing work of, my past 2 trips on the ground to East Palestine, hopefully a third one coming soon, Jordan getting back out to Flint in just a couple weeks again, and as well as covering all sorts of other stories that are going on across the country. Jordan was live from Rutgers University earlier today where there was a protest going on. Last summer when the Roe versus Wade overturning happened, there was the weekend that happened. We had to have been the only independent on the ground organization in like 4 cities across the US. Tina Desiree Berg was on the ground in LA. I was on the ground here in Texas, where frankly, Roe versus Wade being overturned is a much bigger deal than in some of these other places, just considering the harsh abortion laws in the state here. We had John Farina on the ground in Washington, D.C., literally outside of the Supreme Court where it happened. And we had Jordan on the ground in New York City covering protests there as well. We are going to continue to cover stories like that, as well as stories like this East Palestine story that are frankly not being covered in a real way anymore. At least we're seeing little stories coming in and out. Props to News Nation for doing that interview with Andrew Welton. I mean, it's great to see that. Props, again, even to CNN for getting that story on the CDC workers getting sick. But those are not making headline news anymore. Last week, for the whole Trump indictment stuff, these networks had wall-to-wall coverage of the Trump indictment for basically 24 hours. That was all they talked about, when they knew that nothing was actually going to really happen that day. Like, it didn't, we're waiting to get images of President Trump walking into the building. I mean, we've seen images of him walking into the building. I'm not saying that the indictment stuff isn't important, but we don't need to be wall-to-wall on it all day. There's so many more important stories going on. But yeah, let me make sure I don't have any additional super chats or anything here. I think I'm all good in that department. Well, at that, guys, I'm gonna wrap this up here. If you're not already subscribed to us here on Status Coup, please press the subscribe button down below. You can also follow me on Twitter. I am at LewisD217. We'll see, though. I don't know what's going on with Twitter again. It seems like Elon is on a whole new level of doing some crazy shit over there. So that will be interesting to see in the next couple of weeks. Not getting into that right now. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching. Sorry we didn't have a live stream yesterday for you all, but hopefully today, kind of double dose with Jordan out at Rutgers, followed by this. You're able to get your fix of Status Coup in. Thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Have a great night.